This is York in the mid to late 1700s, at the height of its pre-industrial importance. York was England's northern capital, older than London's modern dominance, more established than the industrial towns that would soon rise around it. The population remained stable across the century, around 11 to 16,000 people. This was not a city expanding, it was a city functioning at a steady state, built for governance and trade, not growth. In this video, I use modern AI tools to bring historic engravings, paintings, and maps to life. The images are drawn from the 1700s, when York was documented as a regional capital, a city worth recording, not for industry, but for governance and tradition. This is York before railways, before factories, before modern speed, a city built to govern, not to produce. This is York's approach, and the first thing you see are the walls. The city walls had stood for centuries, Roman foundations rebuilt in medieval stone. By the 1700s, they no longer served a military function, but they still defined the city. 4 main gates, called bars, controlled entry, Bootham Bar, Monk Bar, Warmgate Bar, and Micklegate Bar. Movement into York was channeled, visible, and regulated. Inside the walls, the city was compact. You could walk from one side to the other in 20 minutes. Streets were narrow, often unpaved and crowded with carts, horses, and pedestrians. Buildings leaned toward one another across the roadways. Space was limited, and every inch was used. York was designed for foot, horse, and cart. There were no wide boulevards, no grand avenues. Movement was slow, deliberate, and constrained by the medieval street plan that still governed the city's layout. The walls did not just enclose the city, they shaped it. Power concentrates where movement slows, and York was built to slow movement, to channel it, to make arrival deliberate. Standing at one of the bars, looking into the city, you would have felt the weight of centuries. This was not a new city. It was an old one, still functioning. This is where York's importance becomes clear, and it was not about production. It was about administration. York was one of the most important assize towns in the north. Twice a year, in Lent and summer, judges travelled from London to hold the assizes, courts that tried serious criminal cases. Murder, theft, assault, civil disputes were also heard. The assizes were not just legal proceedings. They were social and economic events. When the courts were in session, the city filled with gentry, lawyers, witnesses, and spectators. Inns were booked, markets were busier, taverns were crowded. Justice was not just legal process. It was social spectacle, moral theatre, and economic opportunity. Criminals sentenced at the assizes were hanged publicly at Tyburn, York's execution site. Crowds watched. Executions were not hidden. They were performed, designed to reinforce authority and deter crime. This was governance made visible. York also collected taxes, administered estates, and managed disputes across the northern counties. The city was not a centre of manufacturing. It was a centre of management. Decisions made here affected the surrounding region, and the region came to York to have those decisions made. In 1745, when Bonnie Prince Charlie's Jacobite army marched south from Scotland, York prepared for siege. The threat passed. The rebels turned back at Derby, but the episode showed York's continued strategic importance. A garrison was stationed here. The walls, though centuries old, still mattered. This was how governance functioned before bureaucracy became invisible. It was public, periodic, and performed. This is York at street level, and life was dense, regulated, and face-to-face. Markets operated on regular schedules. Thursday was the main market day. Farmers brought grain, livestock, and produce from the surrounding countryside. York was not a manufacturing city. It was a trading city. Goods came from elsewhere. York distributed them. Trades were controlled by guilds. Butchers, bakers, weavers, tanners, guilds regulated quality, set prices, and controlled who could practice each trade. Apprenticeships lasted 7 years. A young man entering a trade did not simply start working. He was bound to a master, learning the craft under strict supervision. The Shambles, a narrow street of butcher shops, was crowded with stalls and slick with blood. Buildings overhung the street, blocking sunlight. The smell was immediate and inescapable. This was not picturesque. It was functional, dense, and unsanitary by modern standards. Reputation mattered. In a city of 11 to 16,000 people, anonymity was impossible. Merchants knew their customers. Tradesmen knew their competitors. Credit was extended based on trust, and trust was built over years. York was prosperous for some, but not for all. Beggars and vagrants were common. Parishes administered poor relief, small payments or food for those who could not work. Workhouses housed the unemployed and destitute. Almshouses sheltered the elderly poor. The gentry attending balls at the assembly rooms rarely saw the alleys where the poor lived. The city functioned through separation, social, economic, and spatial. This was daily life, practical, communal, and tightly woven into the rhythms of trade and survival. This is where York's importance shifts from administration to performance, and the social season was the center of that performance. The social season ran from November to February. Gentry families left their country estates and rented townhouses in York. They came not for business, but for society, to be seen, to network, to arrange marriages, and to display status. The assembly rooms, built in 1732 and rebuilt in 1735, were purpose-built for this. Balls were held weekly during the season. Admission required a subscription. This was not open to everyone. Dress codes were strict. Dancing, card games, and refreshments filled the evenings. The assembly rooms were not just entertainment. They were a stage where social hierarchies were performed and reinforced. Race week on Knavesmire was the highlight of the season. Horse racing drew crowds from across the region. Gentry attended not just to watch the races, but to gather, to be seen, and to conduct the social business that mattered. Introductions, alliances, marriages. The social season was a marriage market. Young women were presented. Families networked. Alliances were formed. A successful season could secure a family's future. A failed one could mean years of waiting for another opportunity. The Theatre Royal, built in 1744, hosted travelling companies. Plays, concerts, and performances drew audiences from the gentry and the emerging middle class. Attending the theatre was not just about the performance, it was about being seen attending. York was not just a capital, it was a stage, and the gentry came to perform. This is York Minster, and it dominated the city in every sense. York Minster was one of the largest Gothic cathedrals in Northern Europe. Construction had begun in the 1220s and was completed in 1472. By the 1700s, it was established, though ongoing maintenance and restoration continued. The building was massive. Stone columns, vaulted ceilings, stained glass windows that filled the interior with coloured light. The Archbishop of York was the second most powerful cleric in England. After the Archbishop of Canterbury, he controlled vast estates across the north, appointed clergy to parishes, and held a seat in the House of Lords. His authority was not just spiritual, it was political and economic. The Minster employed dozens: clergy, vergers, stonemasons, glaziers. It was not just a church, it was an institution, an employer, and a symbol of ecclesiastical power. Church bells structured daily time. They rang for services, for deaths, for celebrations. In a city without clocks in every home, bells told people when to wake, when to work, when to pray. Time was communal, not mechanical. Religion was not abstract. It shaped behavior, confession, penance, charity. It explained the world. Why crops failed, why children died, why some prospered and others suffered. The minster was the physical manifestation of that order, rising above the rooftops, visible from every part of the city. Authority was cultural, not industrial, and that authority was inescapable. This is how York connected to the wider world, and it was slow but reliable. The River Ouse connected York to the North Sea via the Humber estuary. Barges carried coal from the north, grain from the surrounding countryside, and wool from the Yorkshire dales. Wharves lined the riverbanks. Warehouses stored goods. The river was York's primary trade route, and the city's prosperity depended on it. Ouse Bridge was the main crossing point. In the 1700s, it was still crowded with houses and shops built directly on the structure, like Old London Bridge but smaller. The bridge was narrow, congested, and a bottleneck for movement. It would be cleared of buildings in 1810, but during this period it was part of the city's fabric. The Ouse flooded regularly. Low-lying areas near the river were vulnerable. Flooding shaped where people lived and worked, and it was accepted as part of life in a river city. Coaching inns, the Black Swan on Peasholm Green, the George Inn on Coney Street, and the York Tavern in St. Helens Square were where stagecoaches stopped to change horses. Passengers ate and slept. Mail was delivered. The journey from London to York took 2 to 3 days by coach. Inns were not just lodging, they were where news arrived, business was conducted, and travellers from across the country converged. Roads were unpaved and often muddy. Travel was slow, uncomfortable, and dependent on weather, but it was predictable. Routes were established. Schedules were kept. York felt connected, but everything still moved at human speed. This is York in the late 1700s, and the world around it is beginning to shift. Population is growing elsewhere. Manchester, Leeds, Sheffield, canals are being cut. Coal is being extracted at scale. Factories are being built. The Industrial Revolution is beginning, but it is happening somewhere else. York does not industrialize because it has no coal, no fast-flowing rivers for water power, and no economic structure built for production. Guilds resist innovation. The gentry prefer York to remain genteel, a place for governance and social performance, not factories and smoke. Geography and preference align. York stays as it was, but the pressure is building. National markets are expanding. The pace of change is accelerating. The world that York represents, slow, stable, governed by tradition and face-to-face relationships, is being overtaken by a world of speed, scale, and mechanization. York will survive, it will adapt, but it will not lead the next phase. The future is being built in cities that did not exist a century earlier, and York will watch from the sidelines. This world still works, but it won't for much longer. Before England industrialized, this is how it governed itself. York was not a city of production. It was a city of administration, trade, and social performance. Power was exercised through courts, clergy, and seasonal gatherings. Time moved at the pace of horses and rivers. Reputation was built over years, not transactions. This was not a world in decline. It was a world functioning under its own logic, and that logic would soon be replaced by something faster, larger, and less personal. If there's another city, another moment, or another world that functioned before the modern one replaced it, let me know in the comments. I'd love to continue exploring how the past actually worked. Thank you for watching.